something I thought we'd do, a little bit different from what we've been looking at so far. I thought we'd take a look at the Killer7 comic book that was produced along with the game. Yeah, there was a comic book. I guess it didn't do so well. It was canceled early on in its run. It was supposed to, I guess, cover the events of the game. And in the comic issues that did get released, it does do this. But it didn't come anywhere close to actually covering the entire game. So, this comic, there were 4 normal issues, and there was also 1 promotional issue, an issue 0, and that's what we're looking at right here. You can take a look at the quality of the art that we can expect to see in this Killer7 comic right here. You know, I don't mean to be judgmental, but I would say that Killer7 is not going to be on anyone's list of maybe higher quality comic books. It's, as much as I like the game Killer7, I really don't like the comic Killer7. It's not a good translation, I think. I mean, technically, the things that happen in the game happen in this comic. But it's all about the presentation, and I guess you're going to see what that presentation is like in a little bit. What we're seeing right now is the cover for issue 0. But it's kind of an odd thing because there were 2 versions of the promo comic release. There was issue 0, and there was issue 1/2. This is the cover for 1/2. The reason this is weird is because issue 1/2 has all of the pages from issue 0, but then it also has more. So issue 0, it only has half of the promo comic story, and then it stops. Then issue 1/2 has the remaining pages. So there's really no reason for issue 0 to exist. Issue 1/2 is the one that has the entire thing. So that's what we're going to be looking at. And let me tell you, it's not so easy to find the scans of this comic. I mean, issue 1 through 4, those were not too difficult to find. But issue 0, I had to look a while, I think, before I was able to find anything I could work with here. I found some scans of the comic on this website, this archived Killer7 fan website that has some of the comics here. Didn't have all of the scans from the promo comic, though. I found some what appear to be direct digital images of the comic, not scans, but digital images, from this one forum thread in which someone was trying to find the promotional comic that was distributed at Comic-Con, talking about this. And aside from that, I was not able to find most of the pages from the second half, from issue 1/2. So the only way I was able to find any images from the comic, from that second half, was by watching this YouTube review of the entire Killer7 comic series, in which they do have issue 1/2 and did show images from it. So I took screenshots from this video and knitted them together into full images. So that's basically what I'm working with right here. Now, let's start going through Killer7 issue 1/2, which is going to cover the beginning of the game, the first chapter, Angel. We begin with a close-up shot of the Washington Monument, July 3rd, 2003. So, nothing wrong with this panel. One thing I would mention, though, is that the dates are off. It takes place in, this is 2003, and the actual first mission in Killer7 takes place in 2010, so the date information not quite right, but that's really doesn't matter all that much. In Washington, D.C., Garcian Smith is walking by the Washington Monument on the 10th anniversary of Global Unification Day. So what that's referring to is, in the backstory that we heard about the game in this past video, world peace had been declared, and that's basically the day that everyone celebrates. They call it Global Unification Day. I forget if the term is ever actually said in the game itself. We'll see about that as we continue on in the game, but that's what this is referring to. Everyone's celebrating. Everyone loves world peace. Everyone loves missiles being shot into the air to collide with other missiles. Garcian's walking by. And then he encounters Christopher Mills, and we've seen this scene in the game. The two of them walk by each other. They don't acknowledge each other, but they pass an envelope from one to the other. And then Garcian apparently goes back home. because this is his trailer house, and he and Mills have the same phone conversation that they had in the game. Except in this comic, Garcian, I guess, leaves Washington, D.C., goes back to his trailer home in Seattle, the other side of the country, in order to look inside the envelope. That seems kind of unnecessary, but okay, I guess he didn't want to look in the envelope before he was good and comfy. He's finding out what his mission is, that he has to go into the Celtic Arms, kill all the Heaven Smiles, but keep one alive, to find out who's pulling the strings. Now, Garcian arrives at the Celtic Arms, and it seems a lot more dilapidated than it does in the game. Like in the comic, this just looks like a condemned building. In the game, it seemed like it was a functional facility, but this is completely different here. He walks into the Celtic Arms. The surveillance camera sees him transform into Dan Smith. Alright, so far so good. That is the transformation that we saw in the game. Dan finds that the security station in the building is covered with blood and gore. And then he encounters someone who is running out of the building, saying not to come in here. Yeah, so far, that is what we saw in the game. Dan says, hi, which is not what he says in the game. Dan does not seem like the sort to say, hi. Dan tries to be a lot cooler than that. The man tries to warn Dan that it's dangerous. His friends were all murdered. And then he transforms into a Heaven Smile to attack Dan. And there's something I just noticed, is that the drawing of Dan here, I think they just used the same drawing that was on the previous panel. Let's take a look at that. There's Dan. There's Dan. Again. Yep. That's basically the same thing. It's like they have this one line on his face right there that's different. Aside from that, I'm pretty sure it's just recycling the same drawing. You love it when comics do that. Dan is shocked at what he is seeing. In the game, he kept his cool. He didn't seem to really be surprised at what was happening. Here, he's very surprised. The Heaven Smile says that he has been chosen, charges at Dan. Dan pulls out his trusty revolver and, of course, blams him right in the face. Irk, says the Heaven Smile. As they say, you've heard them say irk many times in the game that you've seen so far. And then blorsh. Now, of course, in the videos that you've seen so far, you have become very familiar with that distinctive sound effect that you hear when Heaven Smiles die. Blorsh. That's exactly what it sounds like. If I had to put that into text, that's what it would have been. So Dan blorshes the Heaven Smile. And here, it looks like they're drawing the blood rising from the Heaven Smile and being absorbed into Dan. So in the game, they never really explain or acknowledge why that's happening. In the comic, they don't really explain it either, but they do illustrate it, so that's a nice touch. They didn't need to do that, but they do draw the circles like Kirby dots of red blood going onto Dan and being absorbed into his suit. So I think that's a pretty nice touch that they actually drew that. Dan realizes that the Heaven Smiles are breeding, and is not happy at the idea that he has to keep one alive. How do you keep a Heaven Smile alive anyway? Seems like they just blow up at the first opportunity. He goes up. Now, in issue 0, this is where it ends. It just stops right here. In issue 1/2, however, it continues on. Dan goes up to the next floor of the Celtic Arms, and the surveillance camera sees him transform into Coyote. There he is, Coyote Smith. And now Coyote encounters someone that we saw in the game. There was a guy who was running from a Heaven Smile, saying, "Please help me." The Heaven Smile grabs him and explodes, killing him. And now we're seeing that in the comic, except the guy looks considerably different in the comic than he did in the game. In the game, the guy was wearing just a hoodie. Nothing really exceptional. In this comic, the guy is shirtless and is wearing a studded collar, as well as on his wrists. I don't know why the artist decided to go for more of a Mad Max style look for this guy, since he looked completely unremarkable in the game. But he's saying, please help me. Coyote's saying, what's going on? Oh no! Heaven Smile, grabbing him. Coyote says, please don't, but we know what's going to happen. Blorsh! He got blorshed. It's the worst fate of all. Whether you're human or Heaven Smile, you don't want to be blorshed. The artist really kind of likes that sound effect for gore and blood. Coyote is not happy at what has just happened. Also not happy at the idea of keeping one alive. He moves up to the next floor. He turns into Kaede Smith. And you kind of see a pattern of what's happening so far. They move up to the next floor, transform into someone else, and then, just kill Heaven Smiles on that floor and move on, because that's kind of accurate to what's going on in the game. They don't have any dialogue with, like, Iwazaru or Yunhyun or anyone like that, or Travis. He hasn't appeared. So not a whole lot of dialogue. It's just moving up to floors and blamming Heaven Smiles and thwacking them and blamming them, and then back flipping into kabloosh. Not sure what happened there. Hold on. Blam. Then she backflips, and then the Heaven Smile over here is very... He seems upset. Like, I don't know, maybe he's in the process of exploding right there. I guess that's probably what it is. He's about to explode. She backflips away from it, and then kabloosh. I'm assuming that is the progression of what was happening there, as far as I can tell. And it looks like she is absorbing the blood from the Heaven Smiles, as you can see with these red lines illustrating that. So, move up to the next floor, turn into Mask the Smith. There he is. He's probably... I think he's the best drawn of anyone in this promo comic. Maybe that's because you don't have to draw a face or anything. Anyway, let's move on to the next... Oh no! Master Smith, shocked at what he is seeing. What he is seeing is this scene. This is from the game. The girl sees a Heaven Smile crawling towards her. Heaven Smile grabs her by the foot and explodes. And unfortunately, she gets blorshed. She gets blorshed. You don't wish that fate on anyone. Except a little bit different now in the comic than in the game. She survives the blorshing, but she is in a very bad state afterwards. She begs Mask to please kill her, and Mask obliges by ramming her. He has nothing to say about the events that have just transpired. Mask reaches for a door, and as he does so, his hand withers, becomes smaller. His sleeve becomes black, and we know what's going to happen. As the door opens, we see a silhouette of someone completely different. Two people, in fact, as Mask has transformed into Harmon Smith. And this intro in the comic really doesn't mean anything. In the game, this has more of an effect because you've heard the name Harmon many times up to this point. Iwazaru mentions Harmon every time you talk to him. You frequently will walk by Harmon's room, and go in to, deposit your blood and save. So you've seen the name Harmon many times, and at this point, you don't know who it is. But then you get to the point where you transform into Harmon, and it's a big deal because this guy is the master. So not a whole lot of effect to seeing Harmon Smith in the comic, I think, because his name has not been mentioned. Also, I'm just going to point out something here. What's with the perspective going on his rifle? It's like right underneath Samantha's chin. I don't know. This doesn't seem really right, unless the rifle is a lot shorter than it is in the game. Like, it should be like going way up past her, but here it's just like snuggled underneath her chin right here. Anyway, we continue on as Harmon and Samantha enter the room to be confronted by the angel, giving off a divine, blinding light. And she asks Harmon, why does he persecute her children, in whom she is well pleased? What happens next? Nothing. This is the last page of the comic, apparently. It seems like there's nothing else after it. So that's how the promo comic ends, which is kind of a weird place to end it. Well, you might say, well, I guess this is a cliffhanger, and maybe in issue 1, it'll take off from this. Actually, no, it doesn't. Issue 1 just starts off with the mission to assassinate Toru Fukushima. Like, it talks a bit about the backstory of Killer7, and then it goes into the mission that we have been doing in this current video, going to Restaurant Fukushima and going after the owner. So the whole events of Angel, the first chapter, they don't get mentioned, I think, in issue 1. So it just stops here. The scene with Harmon and Kunlan, their whole conversation, that actually gets moved to a different place. Like, I think it happens during the mission in Restaurant Fukushima. So we do see that conversation. It just doesn't happen here where it does in the game. And also the fight against Angel doesn't actually happen because the comic just ends right here. So that's the promo comic, issue 0 and issue 1/2 for Killer7. I don't like it. It, like, takes away any kind of charm or any sense of coolness that the game has, and just presents it in a very straightforward manner of, we enter this building, just shoot up some Heaven Smiles, transform into someone else, shoot up Heaven Smiles, transform into someone else, and just keep going like that. There's really no dialogue with any of the interesting characters like Awazuru or Travis. There's nothing like that. It's just big panels of people walking upstairs and shooting monsters. And that's not compelling. That's not very interesting. I mean, technically it is an accurate representation of what happens during this level. It just is presented in a very uninteresting way. But, you know, what can we do? That's the promo comic for Killer7. It kind of blushes all over the first mission of the game. And as we go on, we are going to continue reading this comic. We're going to be looking at issues 1 through 4. And like I said, it does not cover the entire events of the game because it was canceled before it could do that. I believe where it ends is in the middle of chapter 3. So there is at least that to get to before it ends. And, you know, I'm going to say that artwork-wise, this might be the best of the comics. The art gets rough. It gets pretty rough. I don't know if there were just deadlines that they had to hit or something, but the artwork it's something to look at, and not in the good way. I'm going to say that what we're seeing on the screen right now, this page with Harmon and Angel, this is probably better than most anything that's going to be in the proper comic. Like, this has not bad composition and just how the light is drawn, emitting from Angel, and Harmon is, he's like dazzled by the sight. Most everything in the actual comic is pretty ugly. So we have that to look forward to. I mean, I don't really mean to trash the comic this much. It's just, it wasn't done well. I don't know if that just has to do with time limits, people having to get a job done as fast as they can. You know, maybe that's what it's about. I don't know. But we're going to be looking at all these, and I hope you enjoyed looking at the promo comic for Killer7, issue 0 and issue 1/2. Next time, when we look at the comic, we'll be looking at issue 1, and I'm sure that we'll be looking at that after the end of chapter 2. I'll probably want to stagger these, so the events of the comics that we read will already have encountered them in the game. So we don't want the comic to spoil anything, of course, for us. But that's it for the promo comic for Killer7. I'll see you next time for something else.